Welcome to Beer, Bourbon, and Games. I am your host, Chris, and today on the channel we have another exciting interview for you. Today we're going to sit down at Wyndridge Farm / Winding Path Brewery. We're going to sit down with the head cider maker and the head brewer to learn a little bit about their brewing style, a little bit about the location, and just what makes them tick in general. If you're new to the channel, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you found me in my little space of the internet. Think about hitting that subscribe button, leave a like and a comment down below, letting me know what you think of their brewery, of the interview, anything in general. With all that out of the way, I hope you'll grab yourself a beer, kick back, relax, and just enjoy the interview. Hopefully, with something from Winding Path or Wyndridge Farms. I've got the El Dorado Haze here with me, and I highly, highly recommend it. You will not go wrong if you drink this or anything from the brewery. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. I want to thank you guys both for sitting here with me. I know you guys are both extremely busy. You've got a lot of stuff coming out. So we are sitting with Scott and Irena. We're just going to start with a really, really simple one. Just tell us a little bit about yourselves.
All right, well, my name's Irena Wise. I've been brewing professionally for about 10 years now. I started brewing on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. After 2 or 3 years where I got my start, I started with filling kegs, and then I worked my way up to brewing and cellaring. After about 3 years there, I moved out here to PA to work for Victory. While I was working for Victory, I took a leave of absence, and I spent 6 months in Berlin getting my Master Brewer certification. And then in January of 2019, I came to work here at Wyndridge Farm.
My name is Scott Topel. I've worked here since 2013, December 2013. I started making cider when I was maybe 16 or 17. My guy who was at one of my dad's poker parties gave me a recipe or a formula that I went out and just bought to a local cider mill. Didn't use any preservatives, any of their fresh pressed cider, and just started making cider in my house. I ended up getting a little bit better at it, a little bit. I was around 20 by kind of memorizing apple trees around the neighborhood. And I had an old press, a buddy of mine had an old press we used to make cider, and just experiment with. It was a lot of fun, all bottle conditioned ciders. So I was a hit in high school, which was kind of cool. And then I moved to the West Coast to go to school, went to school for music, and I lived up in Santa Cruz for 9 years. And I got back into cider making when I was out there, because I ended up being a kind of caretaker for a set of properties, and they had tons of pear trees and apple trees, so we started making cider when we could. And I wanted to understand what I was doing, so at the time I turned into a motorcycle trip, went up the West Coast and went to University of Washington, and there was a guy there from England named Peter Mitchell, and he was teaching principles and practices, it was called, cider making, kind of introductory level cider making class. You can understand the chemistry and blending and what it takes to make some good, consistent quality cider. It was just over a week, the class, visited a bunch of cideries. And then I came back to Santa Cruz, and my plan was to spend like 2 or 3 days going around renting and trying to find a winery that would let me rent out space to maybe start a business. And the second place I stopped at, I was like, let's do it. So I started a small business there, and we made it together for about 2 years. We went our separate ways. I went back to grad school in Milwaukee for guitar, and then I came back to the East Coast to be close to family. I grew up in the Finger Lakes of upstate New York, and then just kind of wanted to get into a career change, because it became, right around that time, if you want to get any kind of benefits or tenure or anything, to be a professor, you have to have a PhD, and you cannot get any grants of any kind of financial aid if you go to school for the arts. So I didn't want to go into unbelievable amounts of debt, so I changed careers and went back into cider making professionally, and just started doing a lot of experimentation again. I actually went back to the old trees that I used to get apples from in New York when I was in my teens and early 20s. And started doing some consulting for breweries that wanted to start getting into cider, because it was kind of up and coming, popularity for sure. And actually Woodridge reached out to me, and I ended up just staying. They offered me the jobs.
One thing I thought of when I was actually riding up here, it's kind of cool, is you're actually a female brewer. There aren't very many of them. They seem to kind of be coming back, at least in this area, like Naked Brewing. She is a female brewer. Carol Stout obviously was kind of the pioneer. How does it feel to be in such a male-dominated industry?
I've been doing this for so long that I've really built up a community of other women in the industry. And and so I think about it less and less every day. I mean, there are a lot of times now, it wasn't always like this, where a lot of the vendors we work with are women, and so it used to be unusual where I would call, a vendor to place an order and get another woman on the other end of the phone, but that happens more and more.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's just, one of the things that I thought was a prerequisite to be a brewer was you had to be able to grow a really nice beard. Like every brewer I know, they have epic beards, and I could never be one. But
welcome to the team. Now just let yourself go.
So it's good to hear more and more people it's more accepting, because I could see that was probably a big issue back when she started.
I have a degree in chemistry, which helps when you're a 22-year-old young woman walking in saying, I want to learn how to brew. Having a degree in chemistry makes people take you a little more seriously.
What is your brewing philosophy? What has it evolved since you first started?
It's definitely evolved since I first started. I used to have the pretty common mentality that if you just stick to best practices and brew technically good beer, then you'll be fine. But since then, probably in the last 4 years, I've really embraced new techniques and new styles, the crazy hoppy IPAs, sour this, sour that, newer ways of souring, faster ways of souring, cleaner ways of souring. And that's because I saw the people who came into the industry in the late 90s who did make technically excellent beer and stick very close to the technical styles not succeed that way. Or those people that tried to do that 10 years, 15 years before me did have to admit defeat and give up and start making IPAs as well. So I figured I would take a look at them, learn from what they did, and accept sooner in my career that I would have to veer from the traditional styles.
So hazy is the big trend right now, and a lot of old school brewers see that as impurities and all that stuff. So there are a lot of people that don't want to do that style, but unfortunately, those people that are going to die on that hill, they might close their place because hazy is all the trend right now.
Hazy's become so trendy. Yeah.
We were working with a brewer for a while, and his brewer was just like not having some of these new styles. And he's like, all right, man, I'm gonna let you make whatever you want, best beer you can make. He's like, I'll make it after Weizen, and it'll just blow your mind. So he made it, and it took him almost over a year to sell 30 barrels. And then he's like, to actually get rid of it, we took the rest of it and threw a whole bunch of unfermented fruit into it, and we sold it in a week.
How open are they here to experimenting? Because I know you've got your set stuff that you have, but are they okay with you trying the occasional crazy one? Like brewed IPAs were big for a minute. Before New England IPAs were super popular, would you have been able to go to them here and say, hey, I want to make this style that I think is going to catch on? Since you plan so far ahead, can you just interject something like that you think is going to be a hit?
More and more, but it's then still our responsibility to give an avenue for selling that and educate the sales team. You have to say, this is how much we're going to sell it for, this is where we're going to sell it, and here's what the sales team can say about it.
How far is your distribution reach? How far are you selling out now? Are you just Pennsylvania, or has it gone to more states?
Yeah, we're all the way from New Jersey all the way down to Alabama, actually.
Wow.
We've got obviously skip a few states to get to Alabama, but Georgia as well. So we're in 9 states now.
It's a pretty big reach. Here's a pretty big one for people that might not know, is everything recently was sold under just the Wyndridge name. The ciders, the beer, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, you guys changed your name to Winding Path. I did see on the website there's a little bit of a story of the Winding Path, but why did you guys decide to then branch off and split those two out? And then how did the name fully come about, if you wanted to explain that process at all?
We branched off the Winding Path beer line because it was being overshadowed by the cider. And also because we, just from a sales perspective, we needed to be on more shelves and on more taps. So where bars might say, we only want to have one Wyndridge tap handle, and we would say in return, but we have a cider and a beer, we should be on 2 taps. And then you can take a similar perspective to shelves at the distributor, shelves at the grocery store. Or the beers we're going to put in the cider area. And so we have plenty of lines now. Scott makes a fermented fruit beverage line called Wyndridge Vines.
Okay.
So we were branching in many directions.
When I first saw it, I was a little worried, I will say, just because in this day and age, you can go to the beer store and be easily overwhelmed by the amount of selection out there. So Wyndridge being such an established brand, then all of a sudden splitting it and seeing what's this winding path. If someone doesn't know who it is, it might be one of those bad things where it's like, oh, I'm not going to buy that. I don't know who they are. So I was a little worried, but I have seen you guys more places than I ever have before, so it is working. I also have to say that the can art is really clean. With the amount of options on the shelf, being able to get like that clean look, that sells beer, unfortunately. I am a sucker for like really good can art. I know a lot of people are, so it does look really nice, and I think it is working.
Yeah, that's something we made sure we had a part in. We want to make sure it was going to be recognizable but also stand out enough.
Yeah.
That we can kind of differentiate.
I like the logo. I really like the design of it. It looks similar enough to the Wyndridge. You kind of have that same like font look, but it's still its own little brand. I like it. You guys are doing good stuff there. This one's going to be for you, Scott. I know absolutely nothing about cider making. Can you kind of explain the process? How many apples does it take to make cider? Like that whole thing just eludes me. I know a lot about wine and beer, but cider is not my thing. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
I just like a quick descriptor because I would get this question a lot at festivals where you have like 30 people in line or more tap. So I needed a really quick answer, and I would say cider is fermented like wine. We finish it like beer, but cider is cider. So essentially, you get fresh fruit, looking to get the best fruit that you can. We get all of our fruit right now for everything under the core lineup, all of our specialties from Pennsylvania, which is pretty cool. Most of it's coming from Adams County from about 4 or 5 different orchards. The biggest ones are Peter's Orchards and BeerBourbon orchards. We also get some from Lehman Farms and Kitchener Farms as well. But just getting the best fruit you can and getting a good mix, you need to get just, that's one thing that people are becoming more aware of, and that's something we try to educate people with, is that there's all these different grapes. Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Chardonnay. People like apples or apples, but actually no, there's really tart, really sharp apples, there's really sweet, really low acid apples all across the board. And the idea is to get a good mix and get a good clean fermentation that has as much character as you can. So like 2 of my favorites that we work with here are Spy and Gold Rush. And I've done single varietals of those over the years, and now I can definitely hand me any of those bottles, and I can taste that blindfold and you know it's a Gold Spy apple. And I really want to teach people that, to offer people that, so they can kind of see all the different variations of what we can offer. But basically, we get the freshest fruit we can, get a good blend, and then just have a cold, clean fermentation. Cold, we do around 48 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, because most of the things that are responsible for flavor and the esters in fruit fermentation are really volatile, so they can gas off pretty easy. So if you have a really rocking fermentation, it's just bubbling away, a lot of that can go off and kind of end up in a bland apple wine in the end. So cold, slow, develop as much flavor and aroma as you can, and then if you have the space, if you have the time, and your business plan allows for it, the best thing you can do is to mature the soda at that point, from anywhere from 3 to 10 months, and that helps develop some flavors. That's why people ask me, why would you do that? It's like, well, have you ever heard of a Cabernet Sauvignon that's made in like 3 weeks? They're just like cranking it out. You can make a really good, like very fruit-forward, very crushable, sessionable cider or wine like that, but you can just get more development of flavors and complexity. So you'd like to mature if you can for a certain degree of time, and then in the end you have, so that's kind of like your palate to work with, and then at that point it's blending. So that's the biggest part about cider making, is after you get a good solid fermentation. Obviously you're picking different yeasts for different qualities you might want to get out of the fermentation, but then blending is when you can adjust your acidity, whether it's going to have residual sugar or not. If you're dealing with some apples that have a good amount of tannin or not, for like a bigger mouthfeel, more stringency on the palate, there's all these different things you can do, and obviously just different characteristics and flavors from the apples themselves, besides some of those parameters. So you really get to play with it. If you're going to add fruit at that point, have a cranberry or cherry cider, something like that. So basically, and then after the blending process, we filter. Because one big thing with fruit is almost all fruit juices have pectin, and it creates like a hazy bit, but it will all settle to the bottom. It won't stay in solution like you do with like oats or wheat or beer, and it just doesn't look good. Like if you crack a can, maybe you won't see it with a poured glass, or if you have it at the bottom, you'll see all that sediment at the bottom. So we often filter ciders at that point, and then you force carbonate, just like you do with beer, in a conditioning or bright tank, and then you can or keg.
So do you use the exact same brewing equipment, same fermenters and everything that you would in the beer line cider, or
We use the same fermenters for sure, and centrifuge. I use a different filter because the filter I use is Crossflow. It's 0.2 nanomolar micron, which is very small. It's so small that they strip beer proteins and just make it really probably make malt liquor. Take almost everything out of it.
I think you'd have a hard time getting the beer through it too.
Yeah, it would just clog up like immediately. But I don't use anything in the brew house except for the heat exchanger. So out of the whole brew house, we're often getting fruit in that's been in cold storage, so the apples are pretty cold. So we're getting juice that's around, after it's been pressed and pumped into our fermenters, it's around 40 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. It's too cold for cell division for yeast. The yeast will just immediately go dormant, even if you rehydrate them. Sink to the bottom of the tank, and you'll wait probably 2 weeks for that juice to start fermenting. So I run it through the heat exchanger. We kind of reverse engineer and heat up the juices that's coming in, and dive in conditions to that point.
That's really cool. It sounds so much like wine. I didn't realize how close it was because you said about tannin and all that different stuff. Yeah, because it's really the different apple characters are like your different hops. And I think I saw some like astronomical amount of like apples that exist. Like I didn't realize there were that many. What's the most commonly used apple for cider? Is there one that's kind of a staple for?
I'd say in the States right now, probably the most popular, widely used ones are Albemarle Pippin or Newton Pippin and Gold Rush for American cider. They have really good tart qualities. Usually have a good amount of sugar, so you get 6.8 to 7.5% alcohol naturally from fermentation. And you would ask like, how many apples is well? It's usually a bushel, it's about 30 to 40 pounds. A bushel will create about 3.25 to 3.5 gallons of cider in an hour press.
How big is the actual brewing system for the cider? Is it a 15 barrel?
Actually, and that's one thing is I usually tell people, so we're not brewing cider because brewing kind of denotes that you're heating something up to extract, and in this case, fermentable sugars, converting from the starch. So we really don't not brewing at all. We're just getting a different blend of apples. We're pressing them cold, and we actually just heat it up just enough to be able to pitch our yeast and start fermentation. But real no brewing. The only time I actually kind of brewed a cider 2 different times is once I wanted to get, instead of just dry hopping a cider, I wanted to actually get some alpha acids. So we boiled some juice with some hops. So I guess that was just a type of brewing. And then another time, you can make ice cider like you can make ice wine.
I love ice wine.
Like cryo concentrated juice. So I was actually moving out of an apartment. I had to like hurry up. I didn't have time to freeze more apples in my little fridge or freezer. So I boiled juice for hours and hours on a maple syrup evaporator. And so that was kind of like a fire cider instead of an ice cider. But really, it's just no real brewing. It's just even when you're done with the fermentation, it's cold steeping, dry hopping, orange peel, things like that. If you heat it up too much, like you boil a bunch of juice and then fermented it, it'll actually set the pectin, so it'll break down the pectin cell walls and it'll just go into solution. You'll have a real hazy cider that can kind of screw your stomach. Yeah, it might screw your stomach a little bit though. So.
How do you guys decide what cider and beer that you're going to make next? And then how do you decide the names?
We have to walk a balance because we provide beer and cider for this restaurant, this farm, as well as for our large distribution footprint. So we have to have both and make them in the right, volumes. So, for example, I'll make a Pils that's served only here at the farm and an amber lager that is only served here at the farm. We do sell it in cans, but we don't distribute those cans. then I also make our super hop forward silo series that focuses on a new hop every time, and then that's distributed. So I come up with a ton of ideas, I bring them to the sales team, and they say, yes, great, make that one for distribution. Yes, great, make that one for weddings at the farm. I've never heard of that. Knock that off the list. So that's how we do it for the beer.
I do like your silo series. That stuff's.
Thank you.
Was the El Dorado one a silo? I don't.
Mhm,
Okay,
yep.
That one is probably my favorite you've made so far.
Oh, thank you.
I also really enjoy the Sunset Lager. It's good to see lagers. If there is one on a tab, I will support it. So thank you for making a lager.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you decide what to make? I've seen some really interesting ciders that you have, and how do you come up with some of those different ones?
The Eldorado actually fueled my weekend or something. As far as the different things we do commercially, we put out there in distribution, a lot of times it's cider we've had an experience with. I've done a smaller run that have been really well received. Like we did an apples and oranges cider that was made for a bar down in, I think it was called Anthem down in DC, and we sold like 30 barrels just in kegs out of there every 3.5 weeks or so. This was a couple of years ago. So I thought, yeah, that'd be kind of cool to try distribution. So we do pretty well down there. And then likewise, we're going to be doing a honey lavender, which is a cider. So it's a blend of mead and cider, and with steeped with lavender sprigs. So honey lavender, we're just calling it honey lavender cider. There's one thing, like I would love to just have like a name, just a cool name for our ciders, but we've also had, when you were talking about earlier, we walk in, there's just like this huge panorama of beers and ciders to choose from. People are just like, they want to get in and out, whatever the name might be, like, well, okay, what is that? So we're back and forth about whether there's naming it or not. So like, the honey lavender cider just says honey lavender in front, you know what you're getting, so people can pick pretty quickly.
I do think that's probably a smart play.
It's obvious.
Yeah, because I've seen some of your stuff, and it's very simple then to say, well, I don't like ginger, I'm not going to get that one, or I don't like blood orange. Instead of like beer, I mean, most people go like, oh, okay, El Dorado hops, I like that, I like Galaxy hops and stuff, but cider doesn't really have that same like education, like I don't know how to really say it, but people aren't really going in going, oh man, I really wonder if there's Granny Smith apples in this one.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense to just say what's in it, quickly get in and out, because the market for ciders feels different than the market for beer.
Yeah.
Nothing against ciders, because I had a whole bunch of yours and they're fantastic, but I feel like it's a different clientele.
Especially given with the pandemic, we're almost doing no on-premise, no keg fill, so it's all cans and people are often, especially in the pandemic, people just want to get in and out. So this is what it is. It was kind of a quick note for it. But yeah, generally just kind of what we serve here, what people seem to enjoy here, what's been done well for us in small batches before. And then on the other side, for some of the things I do in smaller batches here, it's what's the best fruit I can get that year. And often, because we're actually planting tonnage, we're going to have 500 trees out here just to the side, and a couple other places this year we're doing top work in some other orchards, which is actually cutting off existing trees and grafting new cider apples that rootstock. So, but like this year I'm getting in, I just delivered on Friday on some black twig apples, my Manchurian crab, Wilson crab, and Harrison apple juice. Same fresh pressed cider that was sent out to us from Virginia. So we do get some apples from other places sometimes, and then we got some apples from Ontario, Canada this year, and also obviously from Pennsylvania. So whatever I'm able to get, it's like really good quality stuff. It has some really interesting qualities to it, like some high tannins, some high acids, really awesome complex flavors on their own, especially with the Harrison's, the oldest American cider apple that originated in New Jersey in the 1700s.
Oh wow.
So whenever I can find things like that to kind of play with, like I know I'm going to do a Harrison single varietal in about 10 or 11 months. So that's one way I pick for some of the smaller ones.
What is the current size of your brewing equipment? How many barrels do you have? How many fermenters are you constantly filling? And then the cider we kind of talked about, yours is a little different. You're not really using brewing equipment, but if you could somehow equate that to someone that might be watching it that knows a lot about beer, what that kind of looks like in that regard as well.
Well, the brew system is 30 barrels. It's It's a 4-vessel, 30-barrel system. So 4 vessels, we have mash tun, lauter tun, boil kettle, whirlpool, and we actually have step mash capability on our mash tun. So it's the more German style where I can heat the mash through different temperature rests. And that's how we get the characteristic mouthfeel and foam retention of Hazewick, is because I can do a protein rest at 50 Celsius, then a beta rest, then an alpha rest. As far as fermenters, we have 4 30-barrel fermenters, 4 90-barrel fermenters, a 30-barrel bread tank, a 40-barrel bread tank, and a 90-barrel bread tank. So we really only leave our beers and ciders in the bread tank for a day or two. We have some pretty high-tech cellaring equipment, centrifuge, filter. So we go through the conditioning, clarifying quickly with the aid of that equipment, and then we turn and burn the bread tanks every day. We're doing bread tank CAPs every day because it's beer, then cider, then soda, back and forth, and we're constantly cleaning.
Oh, you make soda here too? I didn't realize you guys had soda.
Yes, actually.
No. But we have 8 150-barrel unitanks, so that means it can be a fermenter or a bread tank. Those are big silos that you see when you're out back. And those are mostly cider. I haven't made beer in those in like a year.
That's a long couple of brew processes to fill those.
Yeah, it would be 5 brewers to fill one of those, and then it would just foam everywhere. Better to only put 4 brewers in it. And in fact, we moved out the dry hopper. So I don't even have the capability to dry hop one of those. And I dread the day that Hazewick becomes so popular that I have to brew it at one of the big guys, because that will certainly change the ester profile in the haze, and it'll come out too clear. So if we can just stick to the size tank it's made in now, save me some work.
You can kind of see the blending process, like we're going to go out there now. So I'll get, at the time, especially during the harvest, which was just the tail end of now, what is like the best fruit we can get? So sometimes we're going to get a whole tanker of Northern Spy next week, and that's going to be for 5,000 gallon fermentation. And then I'll actually spin that under pressure in the centrifuge to get rid of the yeast at the end of fermentation. I will, drop the cone after I cold crash, and then I'll spin it with the centrifuge to try to get rid of most of the yeast. Then I'll allow it to mature for quite a while. But then I have like that profile, and another tank is a different profile, and that's the whole blending process. So we try to maximize the tanks by just filling them up and fermenting that, and then I have that to play with. And I have one tank right now that's full of really tannic, dry cider. So that's another blending component. So just trying to maximize the space we have. And then we also we do some contract work here as well. So I make seltzers for people. We've done that before, just large runs of seltzer out there as well. Those tanks being unit tanks, it's kind of cool how versatile they are to be able to use a bright tank as well.
Well, I didn't realize you guys did contract work too. You guys are doing everything.
We really are. When we think we've done it all, someone comes in with a new product.
And that's something breaks.
It's a good problem to have. Like if Hazewick gets that popular that you have to, I know you dread it, but it's a good problem to have with selling. And even during COVID, you guys are still pumping out the same.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of on-site crew here. It's maybe like around 110, 120. I mean, it includes like the restaurant and staff and everything, but I will say we were both pretty lucky that we were the only two that really weren't furloughed during the pandemic. We were just alternating days, still doing production. So we were working this entire place by yourself all days. It's kind of wild. And we got through it. We were able to keep going. So and then now we're busier than ever, as long as we can keep getting empty cans to fill, which is another problem now. But
I know a few brewers that they can't get cans. They're out of crowd for like 3 weeks. So
we got some sketchy cans in then leaking.
We sold some of our cans because when we switched branding, we switched from printed cans to labeled cans. We didn't have anything to do with the old printed cans. And then once the pandemic hit, we were able to sell them. Other breweries would put beer into whatever they could find, or cideries. And so cans that we were sitting on, dragging our feet about paying someone to destroy and recycle them, suddenly had market value again. Somebody hit us up on Instagram the other day. They peeled the label off their can of beer and found a Barn Dog can underneath. So they hit us up and we're like, how is this happening?
I like label cans so much better because I'm making my table with labels and I'm kind of putting them all together, and like some that I want to do, I can't because the can is printed. I was wondering how much more expensive that might be to actually like make a labeled can instead of an actual label.
It's less about price and more about flexibility and projecting.
If you can project accurately, like it's cheaper to get printed cans overall, but the minimum order is a semi. You know, a semi of 17 to 21 high, rubber pallets of cans. So you gotta have space. We don't have space to do that. And given what's going on in the crazy market, it's hard to predict. So.
And you better hope that you
Or
have
something changes, you can't get a certain apple and it is printed on the can, or you can't get a certain hop and you have to make a substitution. If it's printed on the can, too bad.
What is your vision for the future of the cider program and the beer program? Where would you like to see it go?
As far as cider, like I'm really, really excited for it. So have been working closely with orchards ever since we started. More than 40 minutes from here. But I would like to manage our own orchard. I really think a craft cider should be, as a craft cider maker, I should be working in an orchard as much as I possibly can to really understand the fruit that I'm working with. And I do get out to the orchards, but I'm also so busy in production, it's not something I can always afford to do. So I would just absolutely love to have an orchard right out the window here that I can walk in, I can check sugar levels throughout the beginning of the harvest all the way to the end, and have a part of harvesting and really understand where the fruit's coming from directly out my back door. That's great. So that's something I'm really looking forward to doing. And just providing to consumers a sense of place of where we're getting the fruit. We are right now, like I said, from those 3 or 4 orchards that we're working with, but just to say, hey, this fruit was grown by us, those are the trees right there, and we're offering it here. And I think it's going to be way more of a local, out of the orchard, out of your table, in your glass. I think it's going to be a great selling point. And it's just an awesome process to have fruit right in the back door making cider fruits.
Would you plan enough that you could have like orchard tours where like you can have people come and pick their own apples and stuff?
No, I'll probably run them off the property and my truck if I see it grabbing apples. No, they're all going to be for cider making. And some of them we're hoping are going to have different levels of acidity and tannin we probably wouldn't want to eat them.
Okay.
If these apples take, like, we're planting a bunch of Foxwell and Wicks and Crab, which are both really sharp apples, so an incredible amount of acidity that will probably knock you out from palate. And then when you all get to mill as well, we'll see what kind of tannin we can get out of those apples. I took to travel in England over a year and a half ago, and some of the apples there, they refer to as spitters because there's so much tannin. You literally bite into it, it just takes all the moisture out of your mouth. It's kind of mealy apple flesh, so it's something you can eat, but it makes incredible cider.
Okay. What's your favorite apple to actually eat and not make cider out of?
Well, I think they honestly are the same. The Northern Spy, I think, is a delicious, absolutely delicious apple. And I actually learned this about 3 months ago. I knew a lot about the apple, and I knew it came from New York State, but I didn't know it was first discovered and then grafted and propagated in the Italian garden. Bloomfield, New York. So it was actually, my uncle told me about it, and as he used to drive past it on the way to his work, there was a monument in a small town park, a monument to the Northern Spy in Bloomfield, New York.
I don't honestly think I've ever seen that apple like purchased before. I'll have to look for it now. Is it something that you can find easily at like marketplaces?
Well, they don't. So Northern Spies don't keep too well in cold storage, and that's one of the reasons you probably don't see it too much. Other apples do. You might see more of them. They'll keep on for a little bit longer in cold storage, or CAs control atmospheric storage. So it's really only a certain window you can get them. So if you're going to like Peter's U Pick at Peter's Orchards in New Gardner's, PA, that's where.
Okay. So my favorite is a Pink Lady. I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are just like super juicy and easy to eat and stuff.
Yeah, they got a good mix of everything going.
What about you? What do you see in the future for you?
I would like to see the beer line winding path solidify into something that is, more predictable year to year. Something that we're happy with, that we can offer repeating season to season so that people know what to expect. Pretty happy with where we stand now with Hazeway Blink being our only year-round flagship. that's fine. That allows us to focus on that and really dial in, getting the best yield, getting the most consistent flavor. And then I would like to see the same 3 seasonals. And then customers would just know that they can expect that the Silo series is really the only thing that rotates.
Okay.
The Silo series will be 4 new hop or 4 new hop combinations. There will always be hazeway. And then I would like to see people start to get excited about the seasonals, like, oh man, I can't wait for May because that's when the raspberry sour's coming out. Things like that.
So you're gonna, in theory, only have like one experimental beer overall that you can just continuously change up.
Yeah.
Do you feel, besides Hazeway, that you have any other current ones that are strong enough to be those flagships per season?
We're happy with our seasonal lineup so far. This year for our seasonals, we had a raspberry sour, which was a raspberry Berliner Weisse in the summer, and that's definitely coming back.
Okay, good.
And then we were pretty happy with the Boreal Spruce IPA as well, so that will be coming back as well. So then we just need to find something reliable to be the spring seasonal. And what we're going to do there is do a hazy pale, so that would be a competitor with like Haze Charmer or Mind Haze, and that would be the spring seasonal. And that came from, similar to the apples, the hops I was able to get. I got a nice contract on Eldorado and Idaho 7 hops, and I didn't have anywhere to put them, and I thought, that's a shame. Everybody wants these hops. So then we're going to make a hazy pale with Eldorado and Idaho 7. How can you go wrong there?
You can't. I don't know. Eldorado.
So hopefully we'll be able to consistently get those hops and make that our consistent spring season.
I love that one. What's your favorite hop?
My favorite?
Your favorite
Oh
hop?
my gosh, I think I just like a Zaka.
Okay.
That's the star hop in Hazeway, and
Okay.
that's no accident. I mean, I love the noble hops. I love the tea like, jasmine, Tettinger aroma.
Okay.
But I so rarely get to use those, and they're just used as such a balanced note
There you go.
that it's hard to get fired up about them.
The big one right now is Citra. Everyone has Citra, Mosaic,
Oh,
Galaxy.
We put Citra or Mosaic in most of our IPAs, just as I imagine it's giving a familiar base note.
Yeah, that citrus note that people are kind of associating most things with, and you kind of play around with the rest of the stuff. One of my favorite, I love Chinook. So when you made the Eldorado, I was really excited for that West Coast meets East Coast, because I feel like it's kind of one of those Midwest IPAs. It hits on both. You still have some resin notes. You still have that a little bit of spicy earthiness, but it's still an approachable New England kind of flavor. So it is kind of almost a gateway to get them over to try something not like a juice bomb. So please don't ever get rid of that, please. It's hard to find good West Coasts now, unfortunately. You're a head brewer, and you've been making cider. I believe you said it was 20 years.
On and off, yeah, within the whole time. We had some breaks where I was a music teacher for quite a while.
I was trying to prop you up and give you. You've been off and on for 20 years now. So what's next? What's your next goal? What more can you do? Is there something you can go to next? Maybe make your own cidery. And then for you, do you imagine yourself or envision yourself just staying here and just consistently making the lineups and retire here? Is there some kind of end goal that you really have?
What I'd like to do with my cider making is how I started off was using all wild apples. So I actually live near a rail trail, the Topel Railway that goes across New York State from Syracuse to Buffalo, and it's literally my backyard. I just get up in the morning with a wheelbarrow and my dog and just go pick up apples that are falling on the path from wild apples. And I made some really, really good ciders that I actually brought here for my interview in Wyndridge. And I remember them, they're complex, they had a lot to say, they aged really well. And I was like, I'm going to do this here. And I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, because he started getting these apples sent to us from tended orchards that were getting sprayed, apples that didn't have to fend for themselves in the wild, so and they were also getting irrigated, so they had huge cell structures, and the flavor wasn't as intense as wild apple that's really fighting. So it's really tiny cell structure, really concentrated, packed flavors in that fruit. And then I was getting these apples in, going about the same approach, and I was making, in the beginning, I was just like, this is not what I had in wine. It's kind of bland. How am I going to blend this? And I'm figuring out how to do that in a much better way. But I do want to get back to going into getting some more wild apples, into doing some more wild fermentations. We did a wild fermentation program starting just this last year. And I think it turned out really well, and I want to do some more of that to get gives you a great idea of the fruit you're working with, the wild yeast, which is naturally occurring out of the skins, the calyx, inside the fruit itself. I'd like to get back to that. Really just absolutely focusing on just that apple, this apple, and showing people what you can get out of that.
Okay. Would you make that its own separate line for the wild apples?
We did, yeah. It's just in 750 bottles, and we force card this year, so this year coming up, all the wild fermented ciders and just the smaller lines, I want to do all bottle conditioned, so secondary fermentations in the bottle, and I think the carbonation is way more enjoyable. It's more convincing. It's a lot more work. You're grilling and disgorging, but it's totally worth it.
Okay, awesome. What about you?
I go back and forth. I used to say I would never open my own brewery. There's plenty, but as time goes on, it looks more and more tempting the longer you stay in this field. But it's fun, and I've also talked about maybe becoming a consultant. We're in a great area for consulting because with only spending 1 or 2 nights away from home, you could be consulting down in Virginia, up to New York, over to DC. So I've kicked around a lot of ideas. I usually just try to take it one job at a time. Just wait till it feels right and then see what's out there. But I would definitely, I'm going to stay here for a couple more years at least. I would really like to get this place more based in like standardized procedures and less based in the opinion of whoever happens to be head brewer at the time. There's been a lot of shake-up here every time a brewer leaves without leaving behind, well-established procedures. The barrel program shakes up, the seasonal shake-up, the style of the recipe shake-up. And so I'm always working towards standardizing everything so that when one brewer leaves, the entire brand doesn't go with them.
I think consulting is a good thing because there's no shortage of breweries that are opening up. Every time you turn around, there's at least 12 more that you had no idea were there. So consulting might not be a bad idea. You've been doing it for so long. So I think both of you have plenty of knowledge. Are there any upcoming releases, events, anything that you want to talk about, tell people that they can get excited for? It could be beer release, cider release, any bottles that you have, or even an event outside that's coming up. I know we're getting to the winter months, so there might not be anything outside because the Oktoberfest has already passed, but is there anything going on that you can tell everyone here about?
Well, I already spoke about our spring seasonal for beer. I'm very excited for the spring fog to come out. That's going to be a little maltier, a little bit more of a call out to the pale ale. And then we still have our barrel-aged imperial stout around. We're very happy with the way that came out this year. I was able to use Buffalo Trace barrels this year, and it's much more like leathery, much more like smoky whiskey. And I'm surprised how long our stash has lasted. So
It was a fun day filming those. We first got those in.
Yeah.
Grabbed a little charcoal mixed sample, have a couple sips.
One of the other ones that I wanted to ask you guys just was about this location in general. It is probably the most impressive brewery, cidery place that I've ever been to. You have an awesome restaurant here, both inside and outside, wedding venues. You've got a ton of stuff going on. There's a bar over there where people can do stuff as well. Can you just talk a little bit about, for the people that might not be familiar with this area, what all this location has to offer?
So it started in 2014. It was just a cidery, and maybe you can show a shot later, but it's the small building up there just across from the house. And the owners were living in the main house there, and that was the original location of the cidery. And then while I was making the cider up there, it was just the barn over here, the red barn. They were kind of rebuilding that. The frame was sagging, so they jacked it up, shorted it up, and this was a huge home run. So after they got this whole place built up, by the time we were open, we had a full wedding venue. So we have a chapel over here, and I'll show you later, like the bride's room downstairs. They walk out on the patio, and then over to the chapel there, and then now the owners have since moved, and that is now in. So usually the wedding parties will stay in the inn out there as well, or we just can rent it to anyone who wants to stay there with that amazing view for the weekend. So we're also doing events in the barn as well as wedding receptions. So off days during the week, we often have a corporate training. People will come in, or any kind of meetings that are going on. We often have them in the barn. There's 2 mezzanines. It's really cool. We fit a lot of people in there. In the basement, there's also next to the bride's room is the groom's room, which is a bar, which I really wish we used more of. Like I want to get a pool table down there and a dartboard and use it more as like a speakeasy or something. But right now, it's a bar. It's also a great small place for meetings. So a lot of people rent that space out as well. And obviously, we have the patio out here with the main restaurant. And we're actually seating people sometimes during weekends as well. So people get the experience of have a meal and a beer or cider, and they get to see where it's made right next door. So
That's cool. And you guys just recently did some renovations,
Oh, yeah.
didn't you?
Mostly we just, updated the wall decor and the color scheme. We wanted to make it feel more relaxed because we serve an inherently casual product, craft beer and craft cider. So we updated the menu to be also more casual.
for sure, some small items.
Yeah,
Okay.
burgers, tacos. And then, we added more casual places to sit outside, like the fire pits.
Change the music. Maybe the music now is just it's a really good spatter, more tunes people can kick it to and really they can recognize.
Well, we're on to the very last question here. Is there anything left that you guys want to tell the people at home about Winding Path, Wyndridge, of why they should come here, what they can expect, anything at all that you want to tell the viewers here?
I really want people to come out and see what we've done with the place and great new beers that we're making and new ciders that are coming out soon. And just it's definitely a different vibe here. It's way more kind of lends itself to just being able to come and have a couple beers and chill. Have a couple ciders out on the lawn, bonfire. Before it was a little bit too almost like country clubbish. It just kind of felt a little bit stuffy, and they just really wanted to make it a really stunning place, and they did. But I think it was it's just way more accessible. So I'd love to get people out here just to see that and to try all the different ciders we have. There's Untapped, because we do make a lot of other things that people don't see out in the marketplace that are distributed and we offer here. So I love that. Like we offer a promo here that is an 18% dessert barrel wine, much like a barrel-aged dessert apple wine. I'd love to get people out here to try that, different things that they really can't get anywhere else.
Scott's correct. We have made this a destination the way we always intended to. Whether you're passing through on the turnpike, it's worth jogging down, or if you're just someone who likes to spend your Saturday by visiting new restaurants and beverage producers, we're a destination that's worth the trip, and we have something for everyone.
I want to thank both of you guys for sitting down with me. Hopefully we can get more and more people to come out here, check you guys out, because you do have an awesome product. Both lines are good. There's not one that overshadows the other ones. I feel like they're both as equally good, so they're both dedicated to their craft here. So I want to thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Come on.